Hey everyone! Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how global our community is. Now, let's get started. The first time someone knocked on my neighbor's door at 3 a.m., I told myself it was none of my business and tried to go back to sleep. If you have ever lived in a cheap apartment, you know the walls have their own voices. Pipes cough, fridges hum, someone above you drags furniture for no reason at all. That night, though, the sound was too clean. 3 slow, polite knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. It echoed down the thin hallway outside my door like the building itself was holding its breath. I stared at the red digits on my alarm clock, glowing 3 a.m., and listened. I had to be up at 6. New job, probation period, no room for mistakes. But the knocking kept going, steady and patient. My room felt smaller with every tap, the air colder, like the noise itself was seeping through the drywall and into my chest, waiting to see if I would answer. The second night, it happened again. Same time, same pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. I gave it a full minute, convinced someone else would handle it. Nobody did. The building stayed silent, aside from that sound. Finally, I threw off my blanket, walked to my door, and pressed my eye to the peephole. The motion sensor light in the hallway flicked on a second too late, buzzing to life after the last knock. The corridor was empty. My neighbor's door, 3B, stood at the far end. I had never met whoever lived there, but their peephole was ringed with deep, ugly scratches, like someone had dragged keys or nails around it again and again. The air out there looked still, like a photograph. "Hello," I called through the door. My voice sounded too loud in that quiet. The knocking stopped that I should have gone back to bed. Instead, I undid the chain and opened my door a crack. The hallway light hummed over stained carpet. The door to 3B was closed now, the scratches around the peephole catching the yellow light. I could not say why, but I walked toward it, counting my steps, feeling each one sink into the spongy carpet like I was walking down someone else's throat. Up close, 3B's door felt wrong. The metal numbers were slightly crooked, and the scratches around the peephole were so deep they had exposed bare wood. I lifted my hand and knocked 3 times, mirroring the pattern that had pulled me out of bed. Something knocked back from inside the wall beside the door. Not hard, just a soft answering tap, like a fingertip on hollow bone. The following day, I cornered the building manager in the lobby. I asked who lived in 3B and if everything was okay. He frowned, like I had asked a trick question, then said, 3B is empty. Has been for months. Last guy left in a hurry, said he couldn't sleep. Complained about knocking inside the walls. He shrugged. Old building. Pipes. You get used to it. I did not tell him the knocking was on the door. That night, I went to bed with my phone on the nightstand, recording app open, just in case. The clock slid past 2:50, then 2:58, then 3 o'clock. The second the minute turned, I felt it before I heard it. The air went tight, like the room was bracing. Then, 3 slow knocks from the other side of the wall behind my headboard. I froze. This was not coming from the hallway. It was inside the shared wall between my room and 3B. I whispered into my phone, describing it, hoping I would at least have proof later. My battery, which had been at 48%, dropped to 20, then 15, the way it does when an app crashes. The screen dimmed as the knocking continued, steady and unhurried. Do you hear it too? A whisper slid through the plaster, right where my ear would have been if I had not pulled away. I do not know if you have ever heard your name spoken through a wall in the dark, but it does something to your spine. The voice was close enough that I could almost feel breath through the paint. I did not answer. The next evening, I tried to prove it was just some creep playing games. I waited in the hallway at 2:55 a.m., pretending to check my mail slot. The light above me flickered like a dying candle. When the clock on my phone hit 3 o'clock, 3B's door did not move. No footsteps, no handle turning. The knocking started anyway, this time from somewhere deep in the wall, vibrating through the floor, then crawling up toward my side. The hallway light buzzed and dimmed with each knock, but there was no shadow, no figure, nothing that could be doing it. I went back inside, hard hammering. I checked the recording from the night before, expecting to hear the knocks, the whisper, something. The file was almost 5 minutes long. My voice was there, tired and hoarse, describing what I heard. Then, nothing. Just static and the faint hum of my fridge. No knocks. No whisper. No proof that by then I had already missed one shift because I was too tired to stand. My supervisor told me that another absence and I was done. Sleep became a negotiation. The only way, I decided, was to face it directly. So the next night, I made a choice I could not take back. I turned off all the lights, lay down with my ear pressed gently against the cold wall, and waited for 3 a.m. If something wanted to knock, I wanted to hear exactly where. My phone lay beside me, screen off, battery at 9%, counting down in the dark that at 3 o'clock, the building seemed to fall inward. No traffic outside, no pipes, no fridge, just 3 slow knocks, so close they made the bones in my skull hum. Then a pause, then 3 more, lower, closer to the floor. Like something was moving along the wall, searching for a way in from my side. The knocking picked up speed, traveling behind my headboard, across the corner, finally reaching my front door. I stumbled out of bed and watched, barely breathing, as fresh scratches carved themselves around my peephole from the inside, thin white lines appearing on the painted wood. My phone buzzed. 3:33 a.m. battery at 3%. Let me in, the voice whispered, now right behind my door. From your side this time. I do not remember deciding to move, but suddenly my knuckles were against the wood. I knocked 3 times, the same slow rhythm I had heard for nights. The moment my hand left the door, everything stopped. The hallway light outside clicked on, shining through the crack under the door. My phone screen went black. That I slept until noon for the first time in days. No knocks, no whispers, just a heavy, bloated silence, like the building was full in a way it had not been before. I told myself I had imagined everything, that stress and exhaustion had done it, that I had just punched at shadows until they went away. That illusion lasted exactly one night. The next morning, at 3 a.m., I woke up without knowing why. My room was quiet. My wall was still. But across the hall, through the thin door, I heard it. 3 slow knocks on someone else's apartment. A pause. 3 more. A sleepy voice muttered something. Then footsteps crossed the hall. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the screen lighting my ceiling. An unknown number. No profile picture. The name field simply read, next door. There was one message. Thank you, it said. You finally let me through. Now it is the second story, and this one lives right on the other side of your window. When I first moved into the building, I thought the best part of the apartment was the big living room window. It looked out over a narrow courtyard onto the opposite wing, rows of identical glass panes and sagging balconies facing each other like teeth. At night, most of them went dark. One of them never really did. It was always dim, always closed off, with heavy curtains drawn tight, like someone had stitched the night into fabric and hung it there. I work from home on a laptop, mostly at night. If you have ever done that, you know your monitor becomes a little world, and everything outside those inches turns into background. Still, every so often, my eyes would drift up from the screen and land on that one window across the courtyard. Same curtains, same faint line down the middle where they met. Same feeling that if I stared long enough, something on the other side might blink first. The first time I noticed the glow, it was 2:15 a.m. The courtyard light flickered once, then died, buzzing itself to sleep. Street noise faded, leaving only the distant rush of cars like a sea somewhere else. Then, behind those curtains, a pale blue light bloomed. Not bright, just enough to stain the fabric and outline a shape. A head, shoulders, someone standing very still, right at the window. I froze. hand hovering over my keyboard. The shape shifted, late, as if realizing I was watching. I turned my lamp slightly, and the moment my own reflection moved in the glass, the silhouette behind the curtain moved too, half a heartbeat behind me. If I tilted my head, it tilted. If I leaned forward, it leaned. It was like watching a lagging mirror that I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe the guy across the way was pacing at the same time I was adjusting my chair. Maybe he had his TV on, throwing shadows around. It was easier to believe that than the alternative, so I did, at least for the first night. Still, when the clock clicked from 2:59 to 3 a.m., the blue glow snapped off, and the curtains became a flat, dark wall again. My window staring at its twin in silence. The second night, I tested it. When the courtyard lights sputtered out and the glow returned behind those curtains, I stood up slowly in front of my own window, feeling stupidly exposed. Across the way, a long, narrow shadow rose against the fabric, just a little taller than me, like someone stretching. I raised my right hand, fingers spread. The silhouette raised its hand a second later, fingers long, the angle wrong. Okay, I whispered to no one. Okay, that's weird. I tried to record it. I propped my phone against a stack of books and pointed it straight across the courtyard. For 10 solid minutes, I moved, waved, shifted, sat, and stood. The shadow followed, always a fraction late, always a fraction off, like it was learning in real time and getting better. The whole time, the narrow vertical gap in the curtains seemed to drift, sliding along the fabric until it lined up with my own eyes in my reflection, like something was pressing its face into that strip and peeking through. When I played the video back, there was nothing there. No glow, no shadow, just the opposite window in grainy darkness, curtains still and heavy like stone. I scrolled through the frames again and again, waiting for a flicker, a glitch, any proof. The only movement on the video was my own reflection in my own glass. That be why the end of the week, I started asking questions around the building. In the laundry room, I casually mentioned the neighbor who likes to watch TV late. A woman folding towels shook her head and said the top right unit across the courtyard was vacant, had been since before she moved in. Some guy had a breakdown there, she said, got obsessed with his neighbors, mirrored their routines, that kind of thing, until he vanished. Curtains are nailed shut in that place, she added, like it was a fun trivia fact. The mailboxes in the front hall backed that up. The slot corresponding to that unit had a name half scratched off and a red vacant stamp over it like a warning label that I tried bringing it up with the building manager. He smiled too quickly and told me if I wanted privacy, I should keep my curtains closed at night anyway. Like that solved something. I asked if he had ever been in that unit. His face pressed into a polite expression, but his eyes slid past me to the window behind the lobby door. Old place, he said. Best not to fixate on other people's windows. By then, my sleep was wrecked. My work was a mess. I would be typing an email and realize my fingers had stopped on the keys, my eyes glued to that opposite pane of glass, waiting. Every night at 2:10 a.m., the courtyard light died. Every night at 2:15, the blue glow seeped out behind the curtains, and the silhouette woke up. It got worse when it stopped needing me to move first. One night, I sat perfectly still, hands in my lap. The shadow across the way paced, back and forth, stopping occasionally to turn toward me. When it did, the little gap in the curtain seemed to widen, fabric bowing out as if someone on the other side pressed their forehead, then their mouth, to the cloth that a storm rolled in a few days later. Lightning painted the courtyard white, thunder rattled my shelves. At exactly 2:15, with rain ticking against the glass, the glow returned, stronger, as if the blue had seeped into the storm itself. I caught my breath and looked away, just for a second, at my own TV screen sitting dark in the corner. For a moment, I saw the opposite window reflected there too. Only in the reflection, the curtains on the other side were open. Something tall and blurred stood in that frame, leaning into the glass like it wanted to push through. When I whipped my head back to the real window, the curtains were still closed, tight. Only that single vertical gap hovering exactly in line with my eyes. That night, the power went out. Not just in the courtyard, but in the whole building. My laptop died mid-sentence. The hum of the fridge stuttered and stopped. Emergency lights in the hallway glowed a faint orange, then faded. The only light left came from outside, the gray of the storm and the dim smear of the city. And yet, right on schedule, a pale blue glow pulsed behind the curtains across from me. It was brighter now, wrong in a way I could feel more than see. Like a color I did not have a word for. There shouldn't have been any electricity. Maybe this is the part where you shout at the screen and tell me to close my own curtains, to stop looking, to mind my business. I wish I had. Instead, I decided I was done being watched without knowing who was watching back. That was the choice I cannot unmake. I turned on my lamp, flooding my living room in warm yellow. I dragged it right up to the window so it lit my face like a stage. Then I stood there at 2:15 a.m., barefoot on the cold floor, and stared straight across the courtyard. The glow behind the neighbor's curtains thickened, like something breathing right against the fabric. I raised my hand in a slow, deliberate wave. The silhouette was already there, hand raised, waiting. It had not needed to copy me this time. It had been ahead of me. Its arm was too long, elbow bending a little too high, fingers a little too thin. The gap in the curtain slid with unnatural precision until it aligned perfectly with where I knew my own eyes would be in the glass. The fabric swelled as if two eyes pressed into it from the far side. Staring through at me, I could hear something faint, under the storm and my own breathing. A soft sound, like fingernails stroking wood. In the washed-out blue, I saw fresh grooves appear on the inside of the opposite window frame. Pale lines scratching up toward the latch. As if something on that side was trying to push it open, behind me, the room shifted. I did not hear my TV turn on. I just saw the change in color on the walls, that same pale blue seeping forward, not from across the courtyard, but from my reflection. I looked down. My TV was still unplugged. Its screen glowed anyway, showing a live image of my own window from outside, like there was a camera hovering over my shoulder somewhere out there. In the screen, I saw myself standing in the lamplight, and I saw the window across the courtyard behind me. In that view, both sets of curtains were open. Something stood between them, stretched long and thin across the gap, its face smeared where glass should have been. My next memory is the taste of dust and cold glass. I woke up on the floor with my cheek pressed against my own window. My lamp had been turned away, aimed low, spilling light onto the carpet instead of the glass. Outside, the sky was pale, the courtyard gray and empty. The opposite curtains were exactly where they had always been, heavy and closed. The narrow gap back in its original place. I told myself I had fainted, that I had sleepwalked, that none of it had been real. I even tried laughing about it, though the sound came out thin. It almost worked, until I went to pull my own curtains closed that morning and felt the inside lining. There were faint impressions there, right at face height. For long, parallel marks, as if someone had pressed their fingers hard into the fabric from the glass inward, trying to get a better grip. That night, I stayed away from the window. I sat with my back to it, laptop open, headphones in, pretending there was nothing behind me but darkness. At 2:10 a.m., the courtyard light died. At 2:15, I told myself not to turn around. There was no glow on the opposite wall, no silhouette in my peripheral vision. For the first time since I moved in, 2:15 a.m. passed in pure, heavy silence. I almost relaxed. I used to think the thumps in the wall were just the house settling, until the wall started breathing back. The duplex I moved into was older than it looked from the street. Fresh paint outside, crooked bones inside. I shared a long wall with my neighbor, a quiet guy named Daniel I only ever saw in passing. We nodded in the driveway, exchanged a few jokes about the thin walls, and that was it. My bedroom backed directly up to his. Sometimes, if I lay still enough at night, I could hear his late radio murmuring, the tick of his alarm clock, the sigh of his bed springs when he turned over. It felt intrusive, knowing that much about a stranger's sleep. It also felt comforting, in a strange way, to know someone was right there. The first odd thing I noticed was the dragging. It was subtle at first, just a low scrape somewhere inside the wall behind my headboard, like a bag of sand being pulled along floor joists. It always came between 1 and 1:30 in the morning, when the rest of the street had gone dead quiet. I would be half asleep when it started, my mattress trembling just enough that I thought I was imagining it. Then there would be a pause, and 3 soft clicks from inside the wall, metal on metal, like a spoon tapping an unseen pipe. Point one night. Curiosity 1. I turned off my bedside lamp and waited. When the dragging started, I reached up and touched the wall above my pillow. The plaster was cool everywhere except for one circular patch about the size of my palm. That spot was warm, faintly pulsing, almost like someone had been resting their head against it from the other side. "Daniel," I whispered. My voice sounded too loud in the small room. The dragging stopped mid-scrape. The clicks stopped mid-pattern. For a moment, there was nothing. Then I heard it, 2 sets of breathing. One deep and human, rhythmic, like someone sleeping. The other slow and damp, with too much space between each inhale, like lungs that were still remembering how to work. I knocked on the wall. 3 times, light. Everything went silent, like the house was holding its breath with me. The next morning, I ran into Daniel by the mailboxes. He had dark circles under his eyes and a coffee thermos clutched in both hands. I made a joke about the place having mice in the walls. His expression tightened for just a second, then smoothed. "Yeah," he said. "You hear it too, huh?" "What, the scratching?" He shrugged one shoulder. "Whatever it is. I'm trying not to make a big deal out of it. It belongs in the wall." His smile did not reach his eyes. "Anyway, you get used to it. Most people talking about pests say they, or those things." He said it, singular, like there was only one. That bothered me more than it should have. The dragging came back that night, a little louder. The warm spot on the plaster felt almost feverish under my palm. Cracks had begun to spider out from it, hair-thin lines branching upward and downward like veins. The clicks followed, a steady tap-tap-tap somewhere in the cavity, almost perfectly matching the tick of my bedside clock, around 1:20. When my thoughts had begun to blur at the edges, I heard something else. Through the wall, under the dragging and the clicks, a voice muttered. Daniel's voice, I thought, until the words separated into something I could understand. "You promised," he mumbled, close enough that the plaster carried it. "You promised you'd stay there." I pulled my hand back and stared at the wall in the dark. The house had never felt thinner. Once I mentioned it to friends, the whole thing started sounding like anxiety. Old house, creaks and groans, thin plaster amplifying a neighbor's sleep-talking. My best friend stayed over one night to prove it was nothing. Around 1 in the morning, she laughed at my jumpiness. By 1:15, she was sitting up with her knees to her chest, staring at the wall. "You didn't tell me it felt like that," she whispered. The dragging had started again. But this time it ran horizontally, tracing the length of the wall behind the headboard. The mattress shivered with each pull. The clicks followed, tapping out a steady rhythm that did not quite match the clock. When I reached for the lamp, the bulb flickered and dimmed, buzzing like an insect caught in glass. "Old wiring," my friend said quickly. She got dressed and left before midnight the next night, claiming an early morning. She never offered to stay over again. The landlord brushed me off with a smile, told me old houses settle and talk. That's just how they were. Pest control was expensive, he said, and besides, there were no droppings, no chewed wires, nothing to suggest a real infestation. He promised to keep an ear out and never came by to listen to so it was just me, Daniel, and the thing in the wall, the red herring. The theory I clung to longer than I should have was that Daniel had put some sort of vent or speaker inside the wall. Maybe he played white noise or old recordings to sleep. Sometimes I heard murmuring through the plaster, a low hum that rose and felt like someone talking in their sleep. If I held my breath, it almost sounded like a conversation between two people, one voice thin and echoing, the other tired and human. The night I cut the power killed that theory that I flipped the main breaker just before 1. The duplex fell instantly silent. No fridge hum, no ticking clock, only the distant hush of the road outside. I sat on the edge of the bed with a flashlight off, letting my eyes adjust. The wall looked dull and gray, cracks around the warm spot like pencil marks a T110. The dragging started anyway. Without the clock, I timed it by my own breathing. The scrape moved slowly across the studs, heavy and deliberate, pausing every few inches. From inside the wall, the clicks began, metal on metal, perfectly even. Something living would have faltered. This did not. Daniel. I tried again, louder this time. Are you awake? On the other side, the human breathing quickened. Over it, through it, the slower breath rolled on, unaffected. Daniel's muffled voice came through the plaster, clearer than it ever had. Don't answer it, he whispered. It's stuck. If you answer it, it moves. That was the moment I should have left, should have called someone, should have done anything except what I did. But there is a point where fear curves back into stubbornness. I was tired of feeling like a guest in my own room. A few nights later, when the wall had grown so warm in that one place that it felt like a pulse, I drew a circle around it with a pencil, just big enough to match my hand. When the dragging started, I pressed my palm flat in the center of it. The plaster throbbed once, slow and deep. The clock read 1:29 a.m. The clicks inside the wall sped up, matching the seconds as they passed. AT 1:30, my bedside clock stopped. It froze mid-tick, second hand hovering between the marks. The only rhythm left in the room was the heartbeat in the wall against my skin and the faint metallic tapping keeping time with it. Cracks shot outward from my fingertips, thin white lines spreading in a branching pattern, paint flaking in tiny curls. The bulge rose under my palm, slow and wrong, like dough pushing through cloth. Features pressed outward, a forehead, a nose that was just a little too high, a mouth that did not quite line up where a mouth should be. The impression was deep enough that I could feel its shape along my lifeline. On the other side, Daniel's voice trembled through the plaster. I just wanted not to be alone, he said. I told it the wall was enough. You don't have to open it. Please don't open it. The clicks faltered, then resumed, faster, impatient. The warm circle under my hand grew hot, almost burning. Something thick slid against the other side of the plaster, like a tongue tasting for a crack. Every instinct I had screamed at me to yank my hand away. Instead, I made the worst choice I could have made. I knocked 3 times right in the center of that circle, hard enough to sting my knuckles. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the wall's pulse stuttered. The dragging sound lurched, as if something inside had changed direction. The face impression flattened and smeared sideways, dissolving back into formless bulge. The heat under my palm dropped so fast it left my skin aching with cold. The click stopped. The dragging moved away, slowly, like a heavy body being pulled along a new path. It crept past my bed, past the corner, vanishing somewhere toward the living room. The next day, Daniel's half of the duplex was open. His door stood ajar, no sign of forced entry. Inside, the room was strangely neat. Bed made, clothes folded, alarm clock unplugged. There was no note, no emptied closet, no boxes. Just absence, like someone had traced him out of the space. The shared wall behind my bed was quiet. The warm spot had cooled. The cracks still framed the faint pencil circle, but everything felt flat and harmless, like an old scar. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. It took me a while to notice the new cracks on the opposite side of the room. They started as a faint ring high on the living room wall, a delicate halo around an invisible center. When I touched that spot, it felt just a little warmer than the rest of the plaster. Last night, I muted the TV and listened. Somewhere inside that far wall, behind the couch, something heavy was dragging itself along, slow and patient, feeling its way toward its new room. The tick I heard wasn't from any clock. It was inside the wall, keeping time with my own heartbeat, waiting for me to put my hand there again. Some neighbors get louder with age. The woman in 4B never seemed to age at all. She just watched the rest of us catch up that I moved into the building at the end of winter, when the stairwells still smelled like wet coats and old radiator heat. It was my first place alone after a breakup that had stretched on too long. I wanted quiet, anonymity, and the feeling that time was finally moving forward again. The building was cheap because it was old, the kind of place with a chipped marble lobby and brass mailboxes scarred with names of tenants long gone. My unit was on the third floor. The super, a soft-spoken man with a ring of keys that never stopped jingling, told me, "If you ever need anything, I'll be around. Only advice is, don't take the elevator and don't bother 4B." He laughed like it was a joke, but he did not explain either rule. That I met her on my third night, that I was dragging a laundry bag up from the basement when she stepped out onto the fourth floor landing above me, moving as if she had always been there, like a painting that had decided to walk. Neat dark hair pinned back, gray dress that could have been from any decade, hands folded over a small ring of keys of her own. Her face was the strange part. Not young, not old, just fixed. Skin too smooth at the temples, a smile that did not crease the corners of her eyes. "You must be new," she said. Her voice was calm and warm. "Third floor, right? You look just like when you first got here." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. "I've only been here 3 days." Her smile did not change. "Yes, exactly." She stepped past me, floral perfume trailing behind her, faint and stale, like something sprayed in another room hours ago. A brass 4B tag winked at me from her key ring as she climbed the last few steps on the way back up. I passed the hallway clock on the fourth floor. It was a big old thing in a wooden case, the kind you expect to chime on the hour. Its hands were stuck at 4:04. Someone had taped a note underneath, "Do not adjust." That should have bothered me less than it did. A week later, one of the older tenants, Mrs. Collins in 3A, invited me in for tea. Her apartment was a time capsule of crocheted blankets and ceramic ducks. She asked me about my job, my breakup, the usual small talk. When I mentioned 4B, she went quiet. "You've seen her?" she asked. "Sure. Neat gray dress, hair pinned back. Very put together." Mrs. Collins sighed and went to a bookshelf. She pulled down a framed photo, edges yellowing. "We had a building party once," she said. "Back when the super before this one. Tried to make it feel like a community." The photo was dated in black ink at the bottom, 1984. People in shoulder pads and big glasses crowded around a table with a sheet cake. Near the center stood a woman in a gray dress, hair pinned back, hands folded, looking straight at the camera. Her face was smooth. Her smile did not touch her eyes. That it was the woman from 4B. "She brought a pie," Mrs. Collins murmured. "No one remembers tasting it. Strange, isn't it?" I told myself it was a daughter, or a relative, or a coincidence. Maybe people just repeated looks in old buildings like this. Still, when I checked the mailboxes later, the metal under for B.M. Hale bore deeper grooves, as if the name had been scratched in and polished over many times. If I squinted, I could see faint ghosts of other letters beneath the current ones, initials worn to almost nothing. The first time I noticed the smell and the time together, I had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV on mute. When I jerked awake, the room was dark, my screen showing the reflection of the window behind me. The cable box clock read 11:11 p.m. from the hallway outside. Under my door, a thin ribbon of scent crept in, floral perfume, exactly like the trace she had left on the stairs that first night. It intensified for a minute, then faded as footsteps moved past my unit, slow and evenly paced. I listened as they climbed. "Third floor," Fourth, then a soft click, like a key in a lock, and silence. After that, 11:11 became a kind of appointment. Some nights, I would be at my desk, lost in work, and look up to see the same digits glowing on my laptop clock. Right on cue, the perfume would thread through the hallway, subtle but undeniable, always drifting toward the fourth floor. It made the building feel like it was exhaling something it had held in all day that I started losing time. At first it was small. I would sit down for a minute and look up to find an hour gone. I would put water on the stove, blink, and suddenly it would be steaming, flame higher than I remembered turning it. Friends brushed it off when I mentioned it. "You're stressed," they said. "Time flies when your brain is busy." Busy or not, I did not like feeling like the building knew my schedule better than I did. One afternoon, maintenance came by to check radiators. The super asked if I could let him into 4B because his master key was acting up. He knocked, called her name, and when she did not answer, he tried the knob. It opened a few inches. "She's never out," he muttered. "Weird." He squeezed through, leaving the door cracked. Curiosity stabbed me between the ribs. I should have gone back to my apartment. Instead, I drifted up a few steps and glanced through the narrow opening. There was no sound of a TV, no hum of a fridge, just a soft, steady ticking, like multiple clocks set slightly out of sync. The air was thick with floral perfume, heavy and sweet enough to taste. I saw candle stubs on every surface, wax pooled on old saucers. The walls were crowded with frames. Even from the hall, I could see some of the photos. Tenants I recognized, younger by a decade or two, standing stiffly beside Hale. In each one, she looked identical. Their hair changed. Their clothes changed. She did not. At the end of the hall, above a small table, hung one empty frame, waiting. "Everything okay?" I called softly. The super appeared in the gap, more quickly than he should have, as if he had been standing right behind the door. "All good," he said, a little too bright. He stepped out and pulled the door shut. "Just checking the pipes. She says they never give her trouble." That night at 11:11, the perfume was stronger. The red herring I clung to was that she was some kind of con artist. Maybe she sold agelessness to lonely tenants, took photos as marketing, used clever makeup and soft lighting to keep the same look year after year. The candles, the lack of electronics, the old photos. It could all fit that story if I tried hard enough that I told myself that right up until she invited me in. "It has been 1 month already," she said one evening as I came home with groceries. Her eyes flicked to my face. "You haven't changed at all. I'd love to mark the occasion. Come up for tea at 11. I almost said no. Then I saw the way her smile faltered, just a fraction, and my old flaw kicked in. I hate feeling like the only one not in on something. "Sure," I heard myself say. Tea at 11. At 11:05 p.m., the hallway smelled like normal building air. At 11:10, a faint floral thread appeared. By the time I knocked on 4B, the scent was everywhere, gentle and suffocating. She opened the door before my knuckles hit the wood. Inside, the apartment felt bigger than it should have, like the walls had been nudged a few inches back. The tick of clocks was louder here, though I did not see any on the walls. Candles burned in careful clusters, their flames unnaturally steady. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a small table. "Just like this. I like to remember people exactly how they are when they first arrive." I sat. My chair felt older than me. Steam curled from a teapot that looked antique even back in that 1984 photo. She poured something pale into my cup. It smelled faintly of flowers and something metallic, like pennies held too long in a sweaty hand. The hallway clock outside my door, the one stuck at 4:04, ticked in my mind. My phone on the table read 11:11 p.m. "Why do you have all those photos?" I asked, nodding to the wall. In the candlelight, I could make out faces, dozens of them. Some were Mrs. Collins, younger and less creased. Some were strangers. In every one, Hale stood at their side, changed only by the style of her dress. She followed my gaze. People come and go, she said. The building forgets them if someone doesn't remember. I like to remember. She smiled. You'll help me remember you. Just hold still. She lifted an old camera from the table. It was the kind that took film, the kind you had to click and wind. The back was open. There was no film inside. The air in the room thickened. Traffic noise from the street outside stretched and blurred, as if someone had slowed the world a fraction. When I raised my hand, my reflection in the dark window moved behind by a beat, younger somehow, like seeing a version of myself from a year ago. That I stood up, heart pounding. I should go, I said. It's late. She tilted her head. It is always late somewhere, she replied. Sit. It will only take a second. Time won't even notice. I do not know why I sat back down. Maybe the tea. Maybe the scent. Maybe something in her voice that felt like gravity. Look at me, she said gently. I did. Her eyes were dark and clear, set in skin that had somehow never learned how to wrinkle. Behind her, the empty frame on the wall seemed to pull at the edges of my vision. She pressed the camera shutter. There was no flash, no click, no mechanical sound at all. Still, a pressure rolled through my chest, like a breath leaving that I had not meant to give. The candles around us flickered inward, flames bending as if something had inhaled on the wall. The blank frame was no longer blank.